So I'm Adam Weir.
I'm Dawson Spraggins.
I'm Bradley Harper.
I'm Tyler Dobbs, and we are discussing DACA. We are open to questions.
Please explain what DACA stands for.
So DACA stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and I can tell you more about it.
Go right ahead.
So it was a program formed through executive action by President Obama in 2012, and basically it aims to provide legal amnesty for certain undocumented immigrants who came to the country as children.
When you say amnesty, does that mean then they become citizens?
They do not become citizens. They basically get work permits to work in the country
Indefinitely?
for a 2-year period, and they can renew that.
Okay, so this was done by executive action. What does that mean?
Basically, President Obama issued an executive order on it instead of normally going through Congress,
So he was making law.
essentially, which is controversial.
Why? Tell me why that's controversial.
Well, I believe, in my own viewpoint, that it was an overstep of executive order because in the Constitution it states that only Congress may make or amend laws. Now, there is some leeway, but that's opinion-based, obviously. It's my opinion that it's overreach.
So was his action challenged in court?
So there's Texas versus U.S., and so that was kind of saying that he overstepped his boundaries. He even said, "I can't just bypass Congress and change immigration law myself. That's not how democracy works."
But then he signed it anyway.
Yes.
So what was the result of the lawsuit? I'm going to assume it's still okay since it's still a record. So, okay.
Was there a term to this DACA action? Is there a sunset period on it? Does it end at some point? If so, when? Or is it just open-ended, it goes on forever?
Are you asking about the general program itself or the...
I'm talking about the executive action that instituted DACA. Does it go on without end, or is there a term limit to it? Does it expire?
We did not see any term expiration.
So what was President Trump's response?
When he campaigned, he was really, we're going to end DACA. And then, like post-election, he was kind of like, these children were brought here, and so we're going to find a deal or do something. And then there was never any deal done.
So Obama signs an executive order providing a way for these people to stay in the country legally in like 2-year blocks of time. Is that correct? So then President Trump comes into office. Why doesn't he just sign a new executive order saying, we end the DACA program?
Well, essentially, what that would create is he could deport these people if he wanted to, as you said. If he did that, then the media would obviously catch on to that, and there would be a lot of political backlash against him for doing so.
So then why did he make that one of his campaign platforms?
To appeal to blue-collar voters. And basically, Trump, what he did really well was appeal to nationalistic tendencies, and so he really appealed to the blue-collar workers in Midwestern states and such by saying things, anti-immigration slogans, things like that.
So why is DACA unpopular with these groups?
Well, again, some propagated the lie that arrival was a lie, that immigrants were taking their jobs and such. And I think that worked for him in the beginning because it won him many red states and such.
Okay, so these are people who were brought to the United States as a child. So how old is the average person who's protected by DACA right now?
Three-fourths of DACA recipients live, two-thirds of DACA recipients are 25.
Okay, so how many jobs are they really taking from people? Okay, well, so the point is probably not as many, so I'm wondering where the animosity comes for this particular group.
It might not be right now, but when they get older in the next few years, if DACA continues, then they will be able to catch up.
Okay, yeah.
Certainly, I think the attitudes of the American public right now, many are for. They want the people groups to stay. We have a study done by CBS, and it says that overall 87% of Americans want immigrants who were brought here as children locally to stay. even it's 79% among Republicans, 92% among Democrats. It's very high in any party.
To stay as citizens or to stay able to work legally? There's a big difference there.
It does not say as citizens, just
Okay.
to stay here. So I suppose to have their deportation deferred.
Some sort of solution to make them legal, but not necessarily citizens.
Yes.
That's what you would say. Okay.
I'd say most people want a path to citizenship eventually for the people.
Bradley, do you feel that that's necessary that they have a path to citizenship as long as they're still here legally? Because you can have a green card but not have to be a citizen. I'm asking you particularly for your.
I think it's necessary to have a path for citizenship for people if we're going to keep them in our country.
Why? Anybody help them out? Do you guys agree? Do they need to be citizens, or can they just have work visas? There's a lot of differences between a work visa and a citizenship.
I don't know. I feel like that's a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
I think there should be a general standard for all the people. It really depends.
Okay. Who's going to assess the case-by-case? Sorry. Who's going to assess that?
Well, US.
That's a lot of people.
Probably U.S. Customs and Immigration Services.
Who gets the protection right now? So I would say I apply. I was brought here as a child. I applied for protection for, to have my deportation deferred. What are the requirements that I have to meet?
So the DACA, to fall under DACA, they have to be under 31 as of June 15, 2012, so they'll be 35 years old now. They have to enter the U.S. by their 16th birthday. They have to be a continuous residence in the United States since June 15, 2007, and physically present in the U.S. on June 15, 2012. And they've had they cannot have been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, 3 minor misdemeanors, or pose a threat to national security. And they have to be currently in school or graduated or obtained a GED. And then, as I said before, there are several laws that prevent them from breaking. There are several laws they cannot break.
Does that sound fair to you? Like reasonable? Is there a fee associated with the application? How much does it cost?
$495 to apply.
Is that a burden on some of these people? So does that prevent some of them from applying
Well,
for protection?
I think the idea with the fee is that if you're able to pay that fee, then you're obviously, you can make a living here, you're able to support yourself, or you're being supported. You have a setup that's generally going to help you contribute to your society. You're not just going to be a burden on the welfare system.
What happens if I don't apply for the protection?
Can be deported.
Say that you're an illegal immigrant, subject to deportation.
I was brought here when I was 2 years old. I don't even speak Spanish, assuming that most of these people are coming from Central America or Mexico. You're really going to send me back?
We aren't deporting people right now who haven't done anything, mostly just criminals.
So what happens to the parents of DACA recipients?
So there's DAPA, and so that was deferred action for parents of Americans, and it was put into place by executive order in November of 2014, and it offered 3-year amnesty from deportation, and 3.4 million qualified. And then Trump said that he was going to repeal it.
You said that that was for parents of Americans, so that would mean illegal aliens have come to the United States, they have a child here, and so because of our rules of citizenship, that child is a U.S. citizen. What about the parents of people who are subject to, let's say, I'm the 2-year-old who was brought here, I'm protected under DACA now, but mom and dad are on their way back home. Do they have any kind of protection because I'm protected?
Not under DACA.
They can plead for asylum if they fear going back to their home country.
What do you guys think about that? What's your opinion on that? On sending the parents back? children to stay here?
For the children staying here under DACA, what happens to their parents? Well, I think if the parents are being generally helpful to society, if they're meeting certain standards, you know, they've been, obviously their children are either in high school or going through high school or have gone through high school. So I think if their parents have generally supported their children, I think they should stay.
So what do you tell me? Now I'm somebody different. I now am living in India, and I want to come to the United States because there's better educational systems here, and there's better opportunities for me to get a job here. And so I am waiting in line for legal immigration. Why is it okay for someone who's otherwise a law-abiding citizen to break the law, across the border, come here illegally, and just keep their nose clean for a certain amount of years, and then they're okay? Meanwhile, I'm serving the same number of years, waiting desperately for my application to go through.
Well, it's certainly not a perfect system. It's certainly not what we prefer, but obviously some people do come here illegally, and these type of situations do come about. We just have to make the best of them. We can't act in total fairness. It's just not how the world works. It's not fair.
Does that give me an incentive to continue to play by the rules?
You could argue that it may incentivize breaking the rules per se. Hopefully our border security would act not to discourage that, but you could say that.
Let's rewind just a little bit. You talked about the requirements to qualify for DACA. You have to be of a certain age. You have to, you have to not have violated certain laws, those sorts of things. How are we verifying that for people? We'll say somebody who came from Central America who is fleeing El Salvador, maybe. How are we verifying their age? How are we verifying when they entered the country? I mean, it's not like when they crossed the border, they got a receipt that said you crossed it this time on this date. How are we verifying all of this information, especially if it's from a war-torn country?
So some of them will be you have to be in school.
Right.
So that's one way. And then also you have to have had a receipt of you purchasing something prior to those dates.
Do we see a problem with that, Tyler? How am I going to validate your receipt?
I mean, that's just their requirements.
Okay. Do you guys see an issue with using a receipt with a date on it as a verification?
Obviously, we're operating off of a deficit of information here. They're doing the best they can. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect. But
Do you think the black market for dated receipts at the Mexican border has gone way up? I'm going to
it has,
guess.
I guess.
I'm going to guess yes. What other identification do we have to have to identify that the person is the person? So if it's somebody who's fled El Salvador, we'll say, and they've come into the country, they've applied for DACA, how am I verifying that they are who they say they are?
We can't really say that the research has covered that portion.
Okay.
Could you talk for a couple of minutes? You described the requirements to be protected under this executive order. Why this group of people? Why single out this particular slice of undocumented immigrants for protection as opposed to something broader? Maybe you could speak about that either from the standpoint of why President Obama chose that group, or why public opinion seems to support that group, or your own opinions.
I'd say it's because they were kids when they were brought over, and it wasn't their choice to come to the country. So we're not trying to punish them for coming to the country because it was their parents' choice ultimately.
Others?
Share the same side.
Dawson, do you agree with that?
Yes, sir, I do.
You do? Tyler? So very altruistic motivations. We feel like there might be any other motivations why politicians might select this group of people?
You can certainly say it's for future voters.
How so?
I'd say because, well, they might believe that illegal immigrants, if they come here, they could earn a path to citizenship eventually, that they might vote and lean their party's way, which is, questionable, I'd say, but it's...
Okay. You guys have been researching this heavily. Have you seen evidence of that possibly in your research?
I don't think we have statistics on the voting records of...
I'm not asking for statistics. I'm talking about the things that you've researched, the information you found out about who created the DACA legislation, or executive order in this case, the feelings of both parties, the current president, the previous president, some of the motivations behind that. Do you guys feel like there's a political motivation here?
I personally do.
You do? Okay. To the same end that Adam was describing?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of any very recent news that relates to DACA? Like within the last month?
Yes.
Here we go. So, on April 24th, U.S. District Court Judge John Bates ruled Trump cannot legally end DACA. He argued that they had to begin reissuing temporary visas again. I thought that was quite criminal at best, considering you're forcing a president who basically said that we're not going to enforce the law. You're not forcing the president to say, no, actually, we're going to continue ignoring the priorities of the executive branch of government.
So is that the only court that has decided in that way? Are you aware?
I know it was recent as to your...
Right, that's the one I was talking about that was just last week. Because President Trump had come into office and tried to sign a new executive order saying, we're going to do away with DACA. I'm going to give Congress this deadline until you've got to solve this problem. Not surprisingly, Congress didn't solve the problem by the deadline. And so he had pretty much ordered, you know, Obama did what he wanted to do, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I say stop it. And now the courts are refusing to allow him to overturn the executive order of a previous president. But I was wondering if it's just those particular people in the jurisdiction, or if any other courts had made similar decisions. I didn't know if you were aware of those.
Yes. On January 9th, a judge did order Trump to resume DACA renewals, and they appealed to the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on January 16th of this year. I don't believe there's anything.
Yeah, right. And do you happen to know where the Ninth Circuit is?
You just beat me to that one.
Oh,
I was gonna
I'm
ask that
sorry.
no, I was going to ask the same question.
Go ahead.
And why that's important, yeah.
9th Circuit.
It's okay. It is okay if you don't. You were not
We did.
expected to. But it is out in California, San Francisco. I don't know if that might mean anything to you about other things that San Francisco might be doing with regard to immigrants.
Right now, it is a sanctuary city.
Mm-hmm.
Which means what?
Go to the definition of sanctuary. So while the exact specifications can vary, a sanctuary city's policies overall limit how much the local law enforcement officials can comply with federal immigration authorities to deport immigrants.
Dawson, would you say that's a very conservative political standpoint or a very liberal very liberal standpoint?
I'd say very liberal.
Very liberal, okay. So maybe that would apply to that region,
I would say so,
which may apply to the court system in that region?
more than likely.
Okay.
I'm going to back up, and I understand the question I'm about to ask is not in your research, so do not feel like you have to answer. But I would argue that that decision might be, there's an argument to be made that it's a conservative position because of federalism issues. We're not going to let big government tell us, the states, or us, the cities, what to do, which tends to be more of a conservative viewpoint. Now, the fact that they're using it to enforce a liberal agenda, is where I think some of it clouds issues. But in general, what has happened in the past when states decide to break away and not follow federal policy? Do you happen to know?
Well, obviously we have the notification crisis from South Carolina in the early 1800s. I know that
1860s, yeah. That early.
which resulted in obviously led to
Right.
the Civil War. So
Okay.
I
Are you
think
aware of anything with regard to Arizona? Fairly recently, dealing with immigration.
Are you referring to the airport?
No, not this, but like when deciding that they're going to, have their own ways of checking licenses, when they pull people over for traffic offenses, and they're going to be checking for immigrants, and the federal government says, no, you can't do that. So,
I don't think we
okay, it was just a complete sidetrack. I mean, as somebody who's interested in federalism issues, I was just curious about that. Overall, what is the just general public opinion about DACA.